Yo! Welcome back to One More Meta. My name's Derek, and today we're going to get into another Commander 2019 deck tech, and I'm so excited about it. Some of these commanders are so insane. I know I teased last time that I was going to do more of a deck upgrade. It was actually going to be for the Morph deck, but I got a little overexcited with it, and I actually just put a full deck list together, and it's going to be more of a full deck tech. But that being said, it really will function as a deck upgrade at the same time, so you're going to get the full deck list, a full-on deck. But especially with this deck, because the pre-con for the Morph deck does seem pretty powerful by itself, if you do want to go ahead and upgrade it, the cards I'm talking about today are going to be the cards that you want to go ahead and add to it. Now, obviously, with the Morph deck, we're talking Morphs. We're only talking about the face card here, and it's going to be Kadena, Slinking, Sorcerer. It is so cool. So it's 1 in Sultai, so green, black, and blue for 3/3 Naga Wizard. So Kadena has a couple really cool abilities, and the first one, it makes all your Morph creatures free for the first one each turn, and that is just such a cool ability. Like, it's literally what it says is face down creatures you cast are 3 less to cast for the first one that you cast each turn. Now, why that is amazing is the way Morphs work, and if you haven't played Morphs before, they're really fun, but they're so mana intensive. And the way Morph creatures work is you're paying that 3 colorless just to put it face down. And that's almost like the price you pay for the element of surprise, because you still have to pay mana to flip it over. And a lot of the time, this just turns Morphs into really inefficient, overcosted versions of other cards. Now, obviously, you have the benefits of it being a special ability and all these things where, like, you can get around the stack, you can actually counter stuff that has split second with Morph creatures and all this crazy stuff. And that's great, but it is so mana intensive, and having a commander that lets you get the Morphs out for free is insane, because then you get around that, and now you're just paying the flip costs, which really aren't that bad for most of the cards. And that second ability is even cooler, because whenever a face-down creature ETBs for you, you get to draw a card. So it's going to include Morphs, it's going to include Manifest. This is amazing. There's so many cool effects we can get into with this, and really the pre-con does a great job of taking advantage of all of these. So like I said, for the deck tech, it's going to be a deck tech, but I'm going to focus specifically on cards not already included in the pre-con. I want to talk about cards that I added in and that you could go ahead and add. So if there's a card that just seems amazing and broken in the pre-con I didn't include, I'm going to go ahead and focus on some other cards because, you know, those are already in the deck for you. This is just some stuff to look at outside of that. And before I get into the categories, there is one focus that I feel like the deck needs to have, and this is something that you've probably seen talked about. It's the number one thing I've seen brought up with Kadena, and I feel like that there's a reason for that, and that's instant speed. You need to be able to play your creatures at instant speed in this deck, because being able to play a free Morph per turn on your turn and draw a card, that's cool. Every turn you're playing a free creature, drawing a card, that's great. But if you have instant speed for your creatures, and that's with cards like Vidalcanori, Leyline of Anticipation, and a few others we'll get into today, that is game breaking, because that means every person's turn, because it doesn't say each of your turns, it says each turn. So that means everybody's turn, you're going to go ahead, play a free Morph, draw a free card. And that value is crazy, because that means per round of the table, you're playing 4 Morphs, drawing 4 cards, and that's no mana. That's literally the only mana investment at that point is your commander. And that can be game breaking in a deck like this, because Morphs do have really powerful abilities if you have all that mana left to spend to morph them. So taking a look at the creatures, the idea that I was trying to get to, and this is something I'm going to have to tweak over time and let me know what your thoughts are as well. I wanted to have between 30 and 35 Morph creatures in this deck. Now that does mean we're kind of getting to the bottom of the barrel on some of these Morph creatures. Some of them aren't going to be great, but we're not as concerned with that. We want to make sure that we always have Morphs to play, because we always want to keep drawing cards. Even if it's a less than ideal Morph creature, it's essentially a free card with our commander out. We're really just playing it, drawing a card, and getting a new card anyway. So I'd rather have just a less than ideal Morph creature than a non-Morph creature, because it's basically just a free 2/2 that can flip and get you a little bit of value, and it's replacing itself anyway. So yeah, I'm trying to get between 30 and 35 Morphs, and I think that's, in my mind, that's going to be the ideal number. I know the pre-con, I believe, has in the teens, somewhere around that range for just pure Morph creatures. So I do think you want to up that a lot, so you can just get maximum value off of Kadena and just keep drawing cards, keep getting creatures out, because you do want to flood the board, and you do want to always have answers, and you want to maximize that ability. You want to ideally be drawing at least 2 or 3 cards per round of the table. You don't want to have Kadena out and Vidalcanori out, and then all of a sudden I only have one morph in hand and I drew a card and I don't have another morph. You want to always have morphs on hand. So looking at the creatures, I know I just went on this whole spiel about 30-something morphs. Well, the first one I'm talking about actually isn't a morph, and it's a Pheto Runecaster. A Pheto Runecaster is awesome. It essentially just is whenever you flip a card face up, you get to draw a card. So this is just even more maximizing the card draw. And the coolest thing in this deck is the card draw in this deck, while there's not a ton, especially because your commander is card draw, so I didn't put as many extra card draw spells, the card draw is all repeatable. So with cards like your commander and with cards like this, playing a whole bunch of morphs with your commander for free, drawing a whole bunch of cards, and then when you flip them up, you're getting to draw cards too. This card is super powerful in this deck, and you want these repeatable card draw engines because you want a handful of cards at all times in this deck so you can just keep dropping morphs and cycling through your deck. The next one I'm going to talk about is Dulcet Sirens. I love this card for a number of reasons. The biggest one is I really like, especially in this deck, morph creatures whose morph cost is low. That's amazing because a lot of the time we're playing them for free, so we're only concerned about what that morph cost is going to be. So 1 blue for a morph is great. That's already something I like because we are going to have some of those effects when creatures are flipping over. But then to be able to pick a creature and say who it attacks, that's such a powerful effect in Commander. I know a lot of the times in Commander, combat really isn't how the game wins. People are comboing off, people are doing all types of crazy stuff. But every once in a while there is a massive creature, and to be able to say that creature, go kill that person is a great effect, and it's a cheap effect too in this deck. Probably my favorite card in this deck, and it's not because it's that good, it just seems so much fun, is Ebonblade Reaper. This thing seems awesome. Now when Ebonblade Reaper attacks, you lose half your life rounded up. When it deals combat damage to somebody, they lose half their life rounded up. But it's got morph, and that's where it gets fun. Because there's a few creature effects in here, and these are a lot of the cards I've added, where when they deal combat damage, there's cool effects. So basically how this works is if you have a bunch of morphs, you swing, they don't know what to block. And if you have, let's just say 5 morphs out, they have no idea which one is which. So if just this one just happens to sneak through, you pay its morph cost, you flip it, you don't lose half your life. Because when you declared it as an attacker, it was still a morph creature. It wasn't Ebonblade Reaper. So you get around that, you morph it after basically they've declared blockers if the damage is getting through, and they lose half their life. It's a really cool, it just fits with the whole kind of sneaky theme of the deck. The art is awesome on this card, and I definitely recommend picking it up and put it in there if you can. The next one I'm going to talk about is Mischievous Canar. Mischievous Canar is a really cool card. Again, the morph cost is low. It's only 3 mana to morph, so you get to play it face down for free. And then you get to copy an instant or sorcery spell, which again is an awesome and sneaky effect that you can just jump in and take, and it lets you flip it back face down. That does take out the element of surprise, but in a deck where you're trying to play most of your creatures for free, and you could end up with lots of mana, having that ability and just the option to go ahead and sink some mana to flip it face down and just go copy something else is a really, really cool effect. Primal Whisperer is another one I love, and this is just another one of those sneaky cards because you play it face down and attack somebody, and you can have lots of morphs out, and if they don't block it, just go ahead, flip it up, morph it, and all of a sudden it is a huge creature. It gets +2/+2 for each face down creature, and in this deck there's so many ways to get face down creatures. This could easily be hitting somebody for 10+, and they might not see it coming at all because they just think it's a little 2/2. Your 2/2s get a whole lot scarier when people think they might be that could be a 10+ power creature or Ebonblade Reaper or something else. Yeah, it messes with people's heads, and cards like this make people think twice. Because if you just have a bunch of counterspell-esque effects and kind of just tricky effects like that, if you swing, nobody's afraid of that. They're going to be happy to block. Cards like this change that. We're kind of getting on theme now with these tricky effects, but Riptide Entrancer is similar and just as cool. Riptide Entrancer, if it deals combat damage, so again, we're trying to sneak it in and flip it, you get to sack it and just steal a creature. Not until end of turn, you just get to steal a creature. And again, cheap morph effect. So for almost no investment, play a free morph, draw a card, flip for cheap, you get to steal the biggest creature on board. And this will be that player controls. It's not just from anywhere, but still just an awesome effect, low mana investment, and again, it's letting you cycle through and draw cards because it is a morph. The last creature I'm going to touch on for now is Whisperwood Elemental. This is a really cool card. It's probably going to be a very popular card in the deck because on your end step you get to manifest, which is great. And the way with manifesting too, you play the card face down as a 2/2, but if it's a morph creature, you can still morph it because morphs don't care how they end up face down as long as they're face down. So that is so cool. Plus, this doubles as board wipe protection because you get to sack it. If you have a bunch of face-up morphs that all die, you all of a sudden get to manifest a whole bunch of cards. This does everything you want it to do, and while it doesn't say morph on it, it supports morph so much, and it gets you in a situation where in a deck that can easily overextend with its creatures, having a backup plan and protection like this is just so cool. Now, I could go on for an hour talking about the morph creatures. Like I said, I put 30-something morphs in here, and most of them that I added, if I added the card, clearly it wasn't in the precon. So the cards I added obviously aren't in the precon, and I could literally just go on for an hour talking about these cards. There's so many cool and tricky morphs. Definitely check out the deck list. I suggest going one by one. I literally spent more time than I'm proud of on Gatherer, going through every morph creature ever printed and basically picking what I thought were the best 30-ish of them and the ones that all kind of fit best in this deck. So I definitely recommend save yourself some time. Don't go to Gatherer. Just go through the deck list and check out all the awesome morphs that exist. Quick side note about the creatures. I didn't mention it, but Ixodor did spike hard. If you happen to be able to get one for cheap, definitely put it in the deck. But I really don't think it's that necessary. Getting to morph a creature for a little bit cheaper is great, but a lot of the morph creatures I put in here already have cheap morph costs. It's not super necessary to make the deck work. So don't worry about, I don't know what it got up to. Don't worry about dropping money on that. Most of the morph tree creatures are pretty cheap. They're going to do plenty in this deck. If you have an Ixodor, great, but yeah, definitely not necessary for the deck to work. Looking at the Planeswalkers, the two Planeswalkers we're running are actually crucial to this deck. It's Ugin the Ineffable and Vivien, Champion of the Wilds. Ugin, it makes your morphs cost 2 less. What else do you need? Forget the fact that you get to manifest and forget the fact that you have all these other cool effects on Ugin. It's making your morphs cost 2 less. That's all you even need to worry about. But the fact you get those other added benefits, it's a great card. Ugin is perfect in this deck. And Vivien's similar as far as just being so perfect. She has other awesome effects. She's going to let you fish for creatures and stuff like that. But it gives your creatures flash. That's all that you care about. You're giving your creatures flash. And like I mentioned, you want to play creatures on everyone's turns, maximize that card draw, maximize that benefit of your commander. Vivien is going to do the perfect job of that. Looking at the enchantments, the first one is no surprise at all. It's Leyline of Anticipation. I've already mentioned it, and it's pretty cheap right now. The best thing about this deck is a few of the flash enablers aren't crazy expensive. You can put as many or as few as you want. I actually left out Creature Teferi, which is a great way to give your stuff flash, because I felt like there were enough ways in there already. There's already a handful I put in. But if you're more budget conscious, don't worry about the Vidal Ori. Put that Teferi in instead. Leyline's cheap. I already talked about Vivien. There's a lot of ways to give stuff flash, and this is, thankfully right now, because of the reprint, a cheap way to do it. The next one's Primordial Mist. I believe this was actually from last year's precons, and it feels like it should have been in this year's. It's so good. On your end step, you get to manifest. And again, we get a chance to get one of our creatures face down as a morph. We get a chance to draw a card off our commander. So many benefits. But even then, if you hit a land or something that you can't morph, this lets you exile it face up and play it for the turn. And it says play, so that does include lands. This is an awesome card. It's going to let us draw cards. It's going to let us cheat in more morphs. And you get to cheat in so many morphs in this deck. It's crazy that a lot of the time what you would normally be inefficient versions of the cards end up being even just so much more efficient with the morph reduction cost we get. Speaking of cost reduction, this next one is just so cool. It's Heartless Summoning. It makes all your creature spells cost 2 less to cast. And all your creatures will get -1/-1, but we're not concerned. Our morphs are 2/2s. This is perfect. So what's the difference between having a 1/1 morph or a 2/2 morph? Not much. We're not too concerned about that, but what we are concerned about is now our morphs cost 1. This is so amazing. Again, all this cost reduction. There are ways in this deck, and a number of them, to where even if your commander's not out, you're playing morphs for almost nothing. And the value is insane. And I realize our commander's already making it cheaper, but what this lets us do is, not only will that first one be free, that second one's only costing 1. And the next one's only going to cost 1. And if you get a combination of these effects, it turns into what the Animar morph deck did. Obviously not as strong, but basically all your morphs are just completely free. And you can just keep playing morphs, keep drawing cards, and just flooding the board. Looking at our sorcerers, we packed most of our land-based ramp in here. That's the one thing I noticed with morphs. There aren't a ton of Sakura Tribe Elder-esque effects. There's not a lot of morph go get a basic land effects, so that was unfortunate. But we just packed a bunch of sorcery ramp in here. The one sorcery that I do think is pretty unique and awesome in this deck would be All Is Dust, because all your morphs are face down colorless creatures. So you can have a situation where you just have a board full of morphs, and you can go ahead and play this. Everybody else is sacking everything, and you get to keep all your morphs out, and that is pretty cool. And when looking at the artifacts, obviously Vidal Ori, I've mentioned it already. If you have one, great. If not, like I mentioned, there's other ways to get that effect. You don't have to worry about dropping all that money on the card. But if you do have one, this is a perfect deck for it. And the other one's Dream Chisel. This is just more cost reduction. It's going to make all your face down creatures cost one less to cast. This is another one similar to Exeter that's spiked. So if you weren't able to get one for when it was super cheap, that's unfortunate. If you do happen to have one though, this is perfect for it. It's not one that we have with Ugin and some of the other effects we've seen. They're better at cost reduction, but this is just kind of added cost reduction. So if you do have this card, this is a way. If you get a combination of Ugin and this out, all your morphs are completely free to play face down. So this can really just snowball into some crazy turns. So taking a look at the lands, I kept the land base for the most part the same. There was really not much we had to change relating to the pre-con. It did a pretty good job. There's a couple of cards I do want to add, but for the most part, if you pick up this pre-con, you're not only going to have a lot of the pieces that are in place, you really have a land base that's going to work for you to get to play the deck. Now, the two most important upgrades to that land base that I'm going to have for you are just adding, again, to that instant speed ability of the deck where you can be playing creatures on everyone's turn. Now, the first one's Alchemist Refuge. Talked about this card so much. I'm pretty sure in every deck that has Simic, I've put it in, and I stick by that philosophy. If a deck has Simic, put this card in there. It lets you play all cards at instant speed just for the low cost of that 2 mana and tapping it. Such a powerful effect. And as like I always say, it's on a land. Getting those, if you get an ability that your deck is built around and you get to put it on a land, one, we're not running a lot in this deck, but land tutors are pretty cheap money-wise compared to other tutors, so that's awesome. Two, people don't run enough land hate. That's just the way it is. People don't run enough cards to destroy lands. So getting a chance to get a land with this type of effect onto the battlefield, it's going to be tough to deal with. That's just the way it is. It's going to be tough to deal with. And then what's better than one of these effects in your land base? It's two, and the second one is Winding Canyons. Winding Canyons is basically just a colorless, worse version of Alchemist Refuge. It is a little bit more expensive because it is a reserve list card, but if you have this card or have a chance to pick it up, this deck is perfect for it. It's going to give your creatures that instant speed, and really, we're only worried about our creatures at instant speed. The rest of it, if we can play other cards at instant speed, great. That's not so much what we're worried about. All right, so those are all the categories of cards. Now we're going to get into the game-winning step. So how are we going to win the game in this deck? And compared to other game-winning steps where normally it could be 3-4 steps and all these different ways to win and all these explosive cards, this is really going to be more of a grindy, board control-y, kind of trying to have fun interactions type deck. Really what you're doing with all these morphs is you want to just flood the board. This is the whole game plan, and it really isn't going to vary much, but the cool thing that does happen is the variation within the game plan, and I'll kind of explain that in a second. You want to get as many morphs as you can out. That's the whole point of the deck. You want to be able to play a bunch of morphs, draw a bunch of cards, and play even more morphs. And with those morphs out, you have all these cool effects, whether it's sneaking in that Ebon Blade Reaper to take somebody's life total in half, or maybe you're willbendering something crazy and changing a River's Rebuke from you to somebody else. And that's really what the deck's about. But you do need to have a way to go ahead and win, because I love to dirtle as much as anybody, but every once in a while you do have to find a way to just finish somebody off. And in a deck like this, it can be really easy to fall into these cycles of just dirtling, because you could just basically get into this spot where I'm playing all these morphs, getting all these cool effects, flipping everything. I'm countering this, I'm changing the target of that, I'm doing this. And it's great, you're having a bunch of fun. But life totals really aren't changing much, and I don't think you're going to be swinging. With swinging all those 2/2s, it's only going to do so much to the life totals. So you do want an explosive way to benefit. And in my mind, there is no better card to do that. And I said the word explosive, I said the word creatures. You know what's coming next. It is Craterhoof Behemoth. Craterhoof Behemoth, or a different overrun effect. You can, pick and choose if you want a more budget overrun type effect. Maybe you could run an Overwhelming Stampede and get one of your morph creatures that's flipped with a higher power to make up for that. Whatever you find best. If you are able to play it, Craterhoof just does an amazing job in this deck. And I actually like it in this deck more than a lot of token and just creature-based strategies. And the reason for that is you can get a full board of creatures, and normally that waiting of the turn cycle, if you can't drop that Craterhoof right away, is terrifying, because you know somebody's going to board wipe, somebody's going to do something. But when your creatures are doubling as counter spells and redirection spells and copy effects, it makes you feel a lot safer. And on top of the fact that they're special action cards, so even something like Split Second, or you can react whenever. You can basically respond whenever with a morph creature. And having that ability and having that freedom and you just that feeling of, I can do this whenever I want, it's crazy. And to drop that Craterhoof, swing in with a board full of morphs. That's the coolest part too. You flip them, that's great. You might be able to kill people with just the morphs themselves. And there's so many synergies on top of that with the Craterhoof. We have ways to bounce it back to our hand. We have ways to reuse it, recur it from the graveyard with some of these morphs. Craterhoof just works as a huge finisher in this deck. And I realized it was kind of, when I was looking at ways to win, I was trying to find a winning strategy that was as varied as the gameplay. I was trying to find something, but really what it comes down to in a morph deck is the variation is going to come into those interactions and turn-to-turn things that are happening between some of these cool morph abilities and everything else on the board state. But when it comes down to finishing people off, I really don't think there's a card better than Craterhoof in this deck to just take people out. But yes, that's going to do it for today's deck tech. I really hope you guys are as excited about Kadena as I am. I do think just a dedicated morph commander is awesome. It is dirtily. You get to draw cards. It's really what I like to do. So it seems like it's going to be a really good time. I would love to hear if y'all have any other builds. Basically, I feel like Kadena is just hardcore, just morph. You need to play a bunch of morphs. But if y'all have any different, like creative type builds, I would absolutely love to hear about them. As always, say it every video, and I will continue to say it every video. Thank you so much to all the patrons. We love y'all so much. And get excited because there is more coming very soon. We're going to have, obviously, more deck techs coming on more of these C19 commanders, looking at some of the other decks. Got some other stuff coming for you too. But until then, I will see you guys next time.